Neighborhood. When I asked to borrow $500 for textbooks the following semester, Dad frowned and said money was tight. You're young and single, James. You'll figure it out. Sarah has a family to raise. My parents drove across town several evenings a week to babysit Sarah's kids so she and Jake could enjoy date nights, never once complaining, never charging a dime. Yet when I asked if they could watch my cat for one weekend while I went camping with friends, Mom exhaled like I'd asked her to donate an organ. We're not as young as we used to be, James. We can't be running all over the place. Every family gathering revolved around Sarah's latest triumph or crisis, her promotion at the yoga studio where she worked part-time, her children's piano recitals and travel soccer tournaments, potty training victories, homework battles. If I managed to steer the conversation to my own life for 5 minutes, the spotlight inevitably swung back to her. That's great about your new project, James. Speaking of work, Sarah is thinking of going back to nursing school. Maybe you could look up some programs for her. Even tiny things followed the same pattern. I had paid my own car insurance since the day I turned 18, scraping the money together every month for the beat-up Honda I bought with warehouse wages. At 32, Sarah's car insurance was still covered by our parents. When I pointed it out once, Dad shrugged. Sarah has higher expenses, son. Something inside me shifted that Thanksgiving as they casually discussed marble backsplashes and double ovens. The old ache was still there, but underneath it ran a strange, almost peaceful certainty. They had finally said the quiet part loud, Sarah first, James last. Always. Excuse me, I muttered, pushing back from the table. I walked the familiar hallway lined with framed memories, Sarah's kindergarten portrait, Sarah's high school senior photo, Sarah's wedding, Sarah's children at every age. Out of dozens of pictures, exactly 3 featured me. I locked the bathroom door and stared at my reflection in the same mirror I'd used as a kid. In that moment I made the decision that rewrote everything. If they had decided I came last, then I would finally put myself first. The transformation took 18 months, but it was absolute. Quietly, methodically, I rebuilt my life around one guiding principle: since my family had never invested in me, I would invest in myself. They had no idea how well my career was actually going. They still pictured me struggling on the same entry-level salary. In reality, the little-known computer science degree had landed me a position at a downtown tech startup, where I had already been promoted twice. After spearheading a major client database optimization, my salary jumped from $42,000 to $95,000 a year. What no one in my family knew was that I still lived like I earned 42. Same modest apartment, same 10-year-old Honda, same frugal habits born from years of necessity. Every extra dollar now went into building something bigger. I opened brokerage accounts at 3 different firms, index funds, individual growth stocks, a small crypto position. I devoured personal finance books on lunch breaks and investment videos after work. By the time Sarah's world imploded, my portfolio sat at $210,000 while my family still believed I was one paycheck from broke. Then our startup secured Series B funding from Silicon Valley. As a key early employee, I received stock options that analysts projected could be worth $500,000 within 3 years if we went public. Money was only part of the revolution. The deeper change was psychological. I stopped feeding the old family patterns that had drained my self-worth for decades. When Sarah needed help moving furniture, I was suddenly booked. When my parents suggested another expensive group dinner where the bill was split evenly no matter who ordered what, I politely declined. When they planned a family vacation and expected me to pay a full adult share that equaled a week's salary, I booked my own trip. Christmas became skiing in Vermont with work friends instead of the 2-hour drive to the same relatives. Mother's Day became box seats behind home plate instead of brunch where the conversation never left Sarah's children. I was dating someone real. Rachel Adams, a nurse practitioner I met at the coffee shop near the office. She was sharp, self-sufficient, and carried her own complicated family history without bitterness. What floored me was how carefully she listened, really listened, when I talked about my work, my goals, my interests. Days later she would remember details and ask follow-up questions. It was the opposite of every family dinner where I felt invisible. One night on her balcony, eating takeout lo mein, I finally told her the whole story of growing up in Sarah's shadow. She listened without interruption, then said softly, "It sounds like they trained you to expect crumbs, and you got so good at surviving on crumbs that even now, when you have a full table, you still hide it." She was right. I had been conditioned to downplay every success so I wouldn't disturb the family's solar system where Sarah was the sun and I was a distant moon. Rachel refused to let me keep shrinking. She pushed me to apply for leadership roles, celebrated my investment wins like they were her own, and insisted I accept speaking invitations at conferences after she saw how respected I was in certain online tech communities. Around the same time I started seeing Dr. Olivia Harris, a therapist who specialized in adult children of dysfunctional families. In one session she laid it out plainly, golden child and scapegoat dynamics. Your family needed someone to absorb all the blame and someone to reflect all the glory, she said. Sarah became the proof they were good parents. You became the designated problem so her light could shine brighter. Therapy taught me that their behavior was never about my value, it was about preserving a predictable system. Instead of explosive confrontations, Dr. Harris helped me craft calm, repeatable boundaries and scripts. When guilt-tripping group texts arrived, I stopped replying. When manipulation surfaced, I used short, neutral phrases, "That doesn't work for my schedule. I have prior commitments." Money became the clearest boundary of all. No more chipping in for group gifts I didn't choose. No more interest-free emergency loans that were never repaid. No more pretending I ate steak when I ordered the cheapest salad yet still paid a fifth of a $200 tab. My coworker Ethan noticed the shift. "You walk different now," he said one Friday as we wrapped a project. "Like you finally solved a puzzle the rest of us haven't even seen." I had solved it. Family loyalty doesn't require self-erasure. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Success doesn't have to be hidden to keep other people comfortable. The test came sooner than I expected. My phone lit up on a Wednesday night in March. Sarah's name on the screen. She only called when she needed something, so I almost let it ring. Curiosity 1. James. Her voice cracked. "Something awful has happened. I don't know what we're going to do." Between sobs she pieced together a catastrophe worse than anything I had imagined. The perfect life my family had spent decades protecting had been built on quicksand, lies, fraud, and mountains of debt. Jake's real estate business had been bleeding for months. Desperate to close deals and look successful in a cutthroat market, he began faking documents, mortgage applications, income verifications, employment letters, credit reports. He created an elaborate paper trail so unqualified buyers could secure loans they could never repay. The commissions were fat and fast. To everyone else, Jake had finally hit his stride. But mortgage fraud is a federal crime, and the banks eventually noticed patterns. Auditors flagged discrepancies, traced calls to disconnected numbers, spotted tax forms that didn't match IRS records. Federal agents executed a search warrant, found a box of forged documents with Jake's signature, and suspended his license the same day. Criminal charges followed within 72 hours. Prison was only half the nightmare. While Jake cooked the books, Sarah had been living in a fantasy financed by credit cards opened in her name, Jake's name, and, without permission, our parents' names. $40,000 across 7 cards. Designer clothes for her and the kids, weekend hotel stays, dinners out, the kitchen remodel that ballooned to twice the budget, the private yoga instructor certification she never finished. They had stopped paying the mortgage 8 months earlier. Jake told Sarah the house payment was current while he juggled credit card minimums and daily expenses. A foreclosure notice arrived 5 weeks ago. They had 90 days to bring the loan current or lose the house. The week before Sarah's call, her Honda Pilot was repossessed in the grocery store parking lot. The tow truck driver hooked it up while the kids were still strapped in their car seats. A neighbor rescued the children while Sarah stood crying on the asphalt. The private school had been patient about 2 months of unpaid tuition, but the principal called that morning, pay by Friday or the children would be withdrawn. Jake's criminal defense attorney wanted a $22,000 retainer just to start. They had already drained $26,000 from savings and Sarah's old 401k. If the case went to trial, total legal fees could hit $55,000. Perhaps the worst part was how long they had kept up appearances. Friends and extended family had no idea. Sarah posted curated vacation photos while collection notices piled up in a drawer. She bought extravagant birthday presents for the kids while ignoring final demand letters. Now, the children were asking questions she couldn't answer. Why is Daddy always mad? Who were those men in suits at the door? Why can't we go to birthday parties anymore? On the phone she whispered, James, I'm scared we're going to lose the house, the kids' school, everything. I'm scared Jake is going to prison. The irony was almost unbearable. Sarah, the golden child who had always come first, who had been taught that her wants mattered most, had finally crashed the lifestyle my parents had enabled. Have Mom and Dad heard the full extent? I asked. Pieces of it, she said. They're freaking out trying to figure out how to help, but their retirement won't stretch anywhere near this. Jake's parents flat out refused, they're still mad about money he borrowed and never repaid years ago. A long pause. Then, quietly, James, you're the only one who might be able to save us. There it was. The moment I had unconsciously prepared for my entire life, the moment the family that always put me last would need me first. I need time to think, Sarah. This is a lot. How much time? She pressed, panic rising. Foreclosure is next month. Jake's arraignment is in 5 weeks. 24 hours, I said. I'll call you tomorrow night. I hung up knowing everything was about to change. After 25 years of being told I didn't matter, my family was finally going to discover exactly how much I did. The emergency family meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at my parents' house. Sarah had already texted everyone, James has been fully briefed, please make sure he's there. No one asked if I would help. They assumed rescue was incoming. Sarah sat on the couch clutching a box of tissues, eyes swollen. Jake stared at the carpet, the picture of a man whose lies had finally outrun him. My parents looked a decade older, perched in their matching recliners. The coffee table was buried under bank statements, credit card bills, court documents, and the red-stamped foreclosure notice. Dad. Yellow legal pad sat beside a calculator, our family's ruin reduced to columns of numbers. Mom spoke first the moment I sat down. James, we need to figure out exactly how you're going to get your sister through this. Not if. How? Dad picked up the legal pad. We've crunched everything, son. Here's what it's going to take. $75,000 just to stop the immediate bleeding, back mortgage payments, credit card payoffs, private school tuition, Jake's retainer, and projected legal costs. Your mother and I can pull $27,000 from retirement, Dad continued. We know that hurts us, but blood is blood. Sarah and Jake will sell whatever they can and borrow against Jake's truck, maybe another $13,000. He looked straight at me. That leaves $30,000. We figure if you cash out whatever savings you have and take out a couple personal loans, you can cover the gap. The casual certainty was breathtaking. They had no clue what I actually earned, what I had saved, or what my balance sheet looked like, yet they were certain I would liquidate my life to fix theirs. Mom jumped in, it also makes sense for you to move back home for a while. You'd save on rent, and that money could go toward the ongoing expenses until Jake is working again. Sarah nodded eagerly. And James, since our credit is destroyed, it would help so much if you co-signed a new lease for us and maybe found us a good financial advisor. In one crisis, decades of entitlement were being transferred to my shoulders. I was expected to become the family's new financial manager, cleaning up a mess created by the very favoritism that had starved me for years. Mom's voice hardened. James, I need you to understand something. This isn't optional. Family takes care of family. End of discussion. This is what we do. Dad's voice carried a harsh edge as well. If you fail to rise to the occasion now, if you abandon your sister in her hour of greatest need, then you're not truly a member of this family. You have to choose what matters more, your savings or your blood relations. The guilt-tripping was astounding. They portrayed any potential decision not to drain my accounts as an act of disloyalty to our kin. As though my hesitation to fix messes I had no hand in creating proved a lack of affection for them. Sarah leaned in, tears streaming once more. The children keep asking why Uncle James hasn't visited lately. How am I supposed to tell them that their uncle cares so little he won't assist when they're in crisis? Jake chimed in softly but firmly. Listen, I admit I screwed up, but we're all related, aren't we? Relatives pardon one another and push ahead as a unit. Each comment suggested that my assets were communal property. My hard-earned stability existed solely to bail out Sarah. That the disciplined strategy and wise choices I'd made over years were merely a reserve to shield them from their reckless actions. We've already informed Aunt Linda and Uncle Frank that you're managing the monetary aspects of this mess, Mom added. They had pledged my involvement without consulting me. They had committed my funds and effort to resolving Sarah's troubles before even notifying me. Astonishing presumption. And to make it plain, Dad reiterated, glancing at his notepad. We're not discussing a handout. Sarah and Jake intend to reimburse you once Jake regains his brokerage credentials and secures reliable employment. This is an internal family advance to tide them over a tough spot. A family advance. As if Jake's track record of skipping repayments on loans from his folks hinted at future reliability. As if Sarah's extravagant habits suggested fiscal discipline. We require a response right now, James, Mom stated. The eviction timeline doesn't pause for family chats. The tuition payment is required by Friday. Jake's lawyer demands his initial fee next week. Time is critical. The coercion was overwhelming. 2.5 decades of condition. ING had drilled into me the need to comply, to give up my own needs, and to place Sarah above all. Every reunion had conditioned me to feel greedy for demanding fairness. Every celebration where Sarah's dramas eclipsed my achievements. Every exchange where Sarah's monetary wants were deemed crises while my difficulties were minimized. But the past year and a half had transformed me. Sessions with Dr. Olivia Harris. My bond with Rachel demonstrated reciprocal esteem, my independently built economic foundation. I had mastered establishing and upholding limits. I require 24 hours to sort out the details, I replied evenly. This represents a major monetary pledge, and I must check my balances to determine feasibility. Their easing was immediate. They interpreted my request for delay as agreement to their scheme. Sarah clasped my hand. Thank you, James. I knew you wouldn't desert us. Dad inclined his head. That's the sensible path, son. Use the time to organize the specifics. Mom was already envisioning the expenditure. Once this is sorted, we can return to holiday arrangements. If Sarah and Jake stabilize, perhaps they could welcome everyone this year. Driving back that evening, I recognized my relatives had committed a grave error. They had revealed how minimally they valued me. How deeply they counted on my submission and how profoundly they misjudged me. They were on the verge of learning that the composed, dependable James, overlooked for so long, possessed the ability to refuse. Even more vital, they were about to grasp that the prosperity they assumed they could tap into was controlled by an individual who had painfully discovered that regard must be merited. It has to be deserved. I brought Rachel along for the next meeting. I desired a person who truly understood me to demonstrate to my kin who I had become. Someone who could observe and back me up, remaining steady amid the sentimental pressure. We arrived at my parents' residence on Monday. Evening to find the identical setup. My folks in their armchairs, Sarah and Jake on the sofa appearing expectant, papers scattered on the low table. They believed my one-day postponement was mere procedure since I was assembling their salvation strategy. James, Mom commented as we settled in. We're incredibly proud of you for rising to this challenge. It demonstrates genuine growth and devotion to kin. Sarah grinned for the first time in days. Have you determined how to withdraw from your reserves? We figured you might tackle the house payment initially, given its pressing timeline. Jake bobbed his head eagerly. I truly value this, James. I realize it's a compromise, and I vow we'll return every cent once my credentials are restored. I retrieved a binder I had assembled the previous night. Printouts from my current and reserve accounts, overviews of my holdings, tax filings from recent years, and a comprehensive outline of my possessions and earnings that shattered my kin's assumptions. Prior to discussing my actions, I proceeded calmly. I believe you ought to understand my true capacity. I handed Dad the initial sheet. His checking total was $973. Thus, I displayed my $48,000 current account record. Mom's gaze expanded at my $112,000 reserve balance. The holdings summary came next. $210,000 across various portfolios with exact distributions showing regular contributions over half a decade. Sarah inhaled sharply at my most recent tax document. Adjusted gross. $95,000. Post-deductions and withholdings, my net pay surpassed my folks' pension earnings. I don't get it. Dad murmured quietly. You never indicated you were thriving so much. You never inquired, I responded. In truth, you've never probed about my profession, my ambitions, my partnerships, or my existence overall. You've devoted a quarter-century presuming I was floundering and required direction when, in fact, I've been accumulating fortune and accomplishments while you concentrated on Sarah. Dilemmas. Another paper, my employment agreement, detailed my equity grants. Should the firm list publicly as anticipated, those grants would value between $375,000 and $550,000 within 24 months. You could have assisted us any time, Sarah accused, wounded and blaming. You've hoarded all this cash while we suffered. I've constructed economic stability while you pursued decisions culminating in illegal schemes and enormous liabilities, I corrected. There's a distinction between genuine hardship and self-inflicted chaos via unwise choices. Rachel spoke up for the initial occasion. In the 8 months I've been with James, I've observed how you all disregard him and never question his job advancements, portfolio gains, or long-term visions. Yet you presumed he'd liquidate his assets to correct errors he didn't commit. Mom's cheeks flushed. That's unjust. James never disclosed his prosperity because whenever he attempted to share positive updates, you'd redirect to Sarah's current predicament. Rachel continued, I've listened as he tried to inform you of his successes. And I've seen you brush them aside or disregard them entirely. I displayed photos on my device from the trip Rachel and I took to Hawaii 3 months prior. A 5-day stay in Maui at a luxury spot costing more nightly than their vehicle installments. They were unaware I'd even left the nation. It became unfeasible to integrate into your world amid Sarah's demands. So I created my own apart from this group. I possess a thriving occupation, a solid partnership, monetary stability, and individual aspirations that surpass resolving kin emergencies. Jake appeared confused and frustrated. If you hold all this wealth, why not simply aid us? We're kin. Because possessing means doesn't impose a duty to extract others from the fallout of their decisions, I stated. And because this group has invested decades instructing me that my worth is gauged by my utility to Sarah's advantage. I methodically outlined the recurring theme. Each birthday where Sarah received lavish presents and I got token gestures. Every kin occasion where Sarah's feats were exalted but mine overlooked, all fiscal urgencies where Sarah got prompt support while I was refused. You declared at Thanksgiving that Sarah's household would eternally rank foremost, and I would eternally trail behind, I recalled. You were candid about your hierarchies, and I've chosen to be candid about mine. For the first time, I'm prioritizing my own economic safety and prospects. Dad reviewed the tax forms again. But son, if you can manage to assist, doesn't that impose some ethical duty to your kin? The identical ethical duty present when I required aid for books or when I juggled dual employments for tuition or when I sought $500 while you provided Sarah $13,000 for a property deposit. The double standard quieted the space. They had rendered my requirements trivial and Sarah's desires as imperatives within the kin. Now they sought to leverage kin allegiance to claim my concealed affluence. I'm open to assisting, I announced. But not under the conditions you've outlined. If you desire my monetary support, we're going to overhaul this whole kin structure beforehand. Sarah looked optimistic. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting counseling for all to tackle the bias and harmful cycles. I'm suggesting parity and courtesy henceforth. I'm suggesting documented contracts for any aid with explicit reimbursement schedules and penalties for non-payment. I'm suggesting recognition of how this kin has handled me and tangible shifts to prevent recurrence. Mom stiffened. You can't leverage your kin with stipulations and ultimatums. I'm not leveraging anyone, I replied. I'm proposing aid on conditions that honor my standing as a kin member. If those conditions are intolerable, you're welcome to pursue alternative resolutions for issues I didn't generate. The authority balance in the chamber shifted profoundly. They required me far more than I required them. For the initial occasion, I could insist on the esteem and fairness I'd always merited. What precisely are you offering? Dad murmured. The concluding paper, a thorough plan I drafted with a lawyer acquaintance, rested in my binder. Provisions, prerequisites, schedules, and repercussions. A framework for kin monetary aid that regarded grown-ups with respect and accountability. This is my proposal, I declared. Accept it or reject it. The plan on the low table stunned my kin. We executed a comprehensive pact that altered our kin's functioning, beyond merely issuing payments. I'm ready to supply $55,000 to manage Sarah and Jake's pressing emergency, I recited from the opening section. But this support arrives as an organized advance, not a donation. An advance at 4% yearly interest, to be settled in $1,100 installments each month over 60 months. Sarah scowled. Regular installments. James, we're scarcely covering essentials currently. Which leads to the subsequent stipulation, I continued. Within 3 months, Sarah and Jake must finish an accredited physical education program. The program must gain endorsement from a non-profit debt advisory service, and you must furnish evidence of fulfillment prior to receiving advance funds. Jake fidgeted restlessly. That appears like numerous barriers for kin support. Fewer barriers than incarceration for national loan deception, I responded steadily. The third stipulation involves kin counseling. Every one of us. 5 months of sessions each month with a counselor I select, emphasizing kin interactions, favoritism, and constructive dialogue. Mom's irritation was sharp. You intend to haul us into counseling as if we're a broken kin? We are a broken kin, Rachel interjected. Sound kin don't habitually privilege one offspring while sidelining another for a quarter century. Turning the sheet. The fourth stipulation is open. Admission. Mom and Dad will confess our kin's prejudice and express regret for my enduring handling at the forthcoming extended kin assembly. Dad was appalled. You expect us to degrade ourselves before the entire kin? I expect you to declare the facts before the entire kin, I replied. The identical kin you notified that I was overseeing Sarah's monetary emergency without seeking my consent initially. The fifth provision addressed forthcoming monetary appeals. Any kin member pursuing aid must submit a documented strategy with precise reimbursement conditions. No further urgent advances with vague return assurances. No further uniform expense division without regard for earnings. Sarah, I addressed. You'll have to compose a message to every extended kin member who's learned of your monetary woes, admitting that you've been granted special monetary privileges from the kin. For years my family had treated me as an afterthought, so when they finally fell into desperate financial trouble, they naturally assumed I'd be the one to rescue them. I informed them it would only happen on my terms, a total restructuring of how this family operated. Thanksgiving dinner unfolded exactly as I predicted the moment I stepped into the house I grew up in. Everyone was already seated around the long dining table, the rich aroma of roasted turkey filling the air. Sarah and Jake were deep in conversation about their $35,000 kitchen remodel. Mom had turned ice cold the day I asked for help with my apartment deposit. "James, you have to accept one simple truth," she had said. "Your sister and her children will always be our first priority. You will always come last." Dad gave a slow, confirming nod. "That's just the way things are, son." The words landed like a physical blow. I sat frozen, fork suspended halfway to my lips, staring at them in stunned silence. Then, beneath the familiar sting, a cold, liberating realization settled in. This wasn't new information. This was simply the first time they had said it out loud in front of everyone. I lowered my fork and scanned the table. Sarah was cutting her turkey into precise little squares the same way she had since we were kids. Jake scrolled idly on his phone, probably admiring photos of their new quartz countertops. My parents had already moved on to the next topic as if they hadn't just gutted their younger child. Memory after memory surged forward, suddenly crystal clear. The day Sarah turned 17, our parents surprised her with a gleaming metallic blue Honda Civic that still carried that unmistakable new car smell. I watched from my bedroom window as the three of them laughed and hugged in the driveway while she dangled the keys. 8 months later, on my own 17th birthday, I received a sheet cake and a generic card that read, "Happy birthday, son." No car. No explanation. Just the unspoken rule that Sarah's milestones mattered more. College was worse. Northwestern, $50,000 a year. Mom and Dad paid every single dollar without blinking. They drove up to Evanston on move-in day with a rented box truck loaded with her dorm furniture, a mini fridge, coordinated bedding, a new desktop computer, and more clothes than a small boutique. That same summer I worked double shifts to scrape together tuition for community college. When I asked about any help, Dad sighed and said they had already stretched the budget to the breaking point for Sarah's education. "You understand, right? Sarah has always been the scholarly one. This is her big chance." I told myself it made sense. I accepted that I was on my own. So I stocked shelves at night in a warehouse, bagged groceries on weekends, and mowed lawns in every spare hour. After 2 years I transferred to the state university on a hard-won partial scholarship. My parents missed my community college graduation ceremony because Sarah was throwing a baby shower that weekend. Pastel balloons and gift bags trumped their son's diploma. Sarah's wedding ran $60,000, 300 guests, open bar, live 7-piece band, a venue dripping with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly paycheck. I rented a tux and smiled for pictures while my parents beamed at their princess. 2 years later, when I finally graduated from State University with a computer science degree, Sarah was pregnant with her second child. Mom and Dad chose her baby shower over my commencement. I walked across the stage and searched the crowd for familiar faces. None. That night I called to share the news about my first real job offer. Mom answered distractedly, "That's wonderful, honey, but Sarah's having contractions, we have to run to the hospital." $13,000 handed over without hesitation to help Sarah and Jake buy their first house, a tidy 3-bedroom ranch in a nice.
Like, subscribe, and smash that bell before it smashes you. Stay with Reddit Tales Times for chilling twists, haunting tales, and daily doses of the disturbing. You've been warned.